Hello, everyone, and hope everyone is doing good. I'm happy to be back with you. Uh, we're going to be doing the Sunday School lesson today from session 7. It's Luke chapter 6, verses 27 through 38 that we're going to be going over this morning, and it's about compassionate. Jesus expects us to follow and show compassion just as he did. Now, I know that sometimes we have all kinds of excuses why we don't show compassion for other people. We can discredit them by thinking that they're uneducated, they're not worthy of us to talk to, they're too young, they're too old. There's a lot of reasons that we can pick not to show compassion on other people. And that's not really the Christ way of doing things. Christ wants us to follow him, to show the compassion that he showed to everyone, not just to ones around us who we love and cherish, but to everyone. We have to show that compassion. So we're going to find out exactly what's going on in Luke 6, 27 through 38. But let's do a little bit of the understanding of the context first out of that. That's chapter 6, verses 17 through 49. Now, if we're looking at Luke 5, we're going to see that Jesus demonstrates his authority over sickness and sin by healing a man who had been paralyzed. So Jesus has authority to do these things. He can heal. He can chase demons out. He can do all this. So we see the authority and discipleship continue into chapter 6 from this. Whereas his disciples are walking through a field and get hungry and start plucking some grain off some of the stuff that's growing there. At that time, that was against the Mosaic law. You couldn't do that with unclean hands, and you couldn't be doing any kind of work on the Sabbath. But we fail to realize that Jesus was there. He was the law and the authority. He could dictate that people could do this and that. So Jesus told his disciples it's quite all right to go ahead and eat. So we see later again, Jesus is mad at the establishment by healing a man on the Sabbath. They got mad at him. The establishment got mad at him for healing someone on the Sabbath, because that was, again, they considered that work. But God showed his compassion, love and compassion on the Sabbath day. And Jesus explained the story of who had 99 sheep and one fell in a hole if he wouldn't go back and get it on the Sabbath. So Jesus demonstrated all that. Yes, you can do good works on the Sabbath. You can show compassion on the Sabbath. You can do things on the Sabbath. Luke 6, chapter 6, will portray the summary of the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mount. So Jesus calls us to demonstrate love and mercy to all people, including those who cannot defend themselves. Regardless of whose paths we cross, Jesus calls us to love them the way he loved us. Now, I know sometimes I've been caught in a situation where I didn't feel that kind of love. But Jesus commands us to do that. If we are true followers of Christ, we will follow his example. Let's go on into verses 27 through 31 in Luke chapter 6. And it says, love all. We are to love all. In chapter 20, verse 27, but it says, but I say to you who listen, love your enemies. Do what is good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. And these take us back to the last of the Beatitudes on the Sermon on the Mount of Certainty, where the sermons were done. And it deals with persecution and abuse. So it's what Jesus was talking about in those last verses. In the previous rows in verse 24 and 27, they were not addressed to his disciples. So Jesus used an emphatic you in verse 27 to return the focus to us. Now, he's not talking to the disciples right now. He's talking to us. And he's telling us these are the things that we as followers of him need to do. And there's four of them that he's going to show us. The first that we look at is love your enemies. the most unlovable people in your life. And I'm sure that each of us has enemies that we just rather not be around or even talk to. But Jesus tells us we are to love them, show them love, treat them with love. And that's one of the first actions that we have to take. We go on to see that the second one is do what is good for those you hate. Not only we're supposed to love them, we're supposed to do good to them. Now that's laying a double whammy on us. We're to love somebody we hate. We're to do good to somebody we hate. That's how Jesus was to everyone he met. Even the enemies that were against him, Jesus loved. He did good to everyone, no matter who it was. So the third action that he tells us to do is to bless those who curse us. Bless the ones who curse us. Now, how many times have you turned around and blessed somebody who cursed you? But that's Jesus' way. To love, do what is good, to bless. And last but not least, we're to pray for them. We're to pray for those who mistreat us. In this time in our country's history right now is a prime example when we need to love our enemies. We need to love them. We need to show that Christ love. How are we going to let people expect us to be Christians if we're not following Christ's way? When he tells us to love our enemies, we need to love them. We need to pour out love to them. We need to show that this is the same way Christ is, because they may not know Christ. And if they look at us and we tell them we're Christian and don't have the show of what Christ does, then we're not really showing what Christ is about. So we need to love our enemies. We need to do what is good for those who hate us. We need to bless those who curse us, and we need to pray for those who mistreat us. And that's is what verses 27 and 28 is telling us to do. The 4 actions God is telling us to do. Now, if we go on and go into verse 29, and down through 31, I think, we'll see more, because we can see in verse 31, it also appears in Matthew 7, verse 12, and is one of the most familiar teachings in the Scripture. Treat others the way you desire to be treated. And that's where we're heading, folks. Because we live in a world where the stronger often prey on the weak. And, as Christians, we have a responsibility to stand in the gap and to defend those who cannot defend themselves. From the unborn in the womb to the neglected elderly, we are called to protect their dignity as individuals created in the image of God. Now, are we really standing up for the unborn? Are we standing up for the elderly and neglected? These are Christ-like qualities that we need to have. We need to stand up. We need to show the 4 actions like Jesus did. We need to remember, if anyone hits you on the cheek, we're not talking about somebody actually coming up and smacking you. A lot of people can hit you on the cheek by insulting you in different ways. And I think that's what Jesus is telling him. If somebody insults you, which is smacking you on the cheek, you respond in the same way. You love them. You pray for them. You do what's good for them. And you bless them. In the same way, if somebody comes up and asks for your coat, Jesus said, give them your shirt also. We should not hesitate to give what God has given us. We should give to everyone who asks us. For after all, we wouldn't have anything if God hadn't gave it to us. So Jesus thinks we should give it on too. And that verse covers verses 27 and 28 right there. Anyone who hits your cheek, Love them. Do good for them. Bless them. Pray for them. If they ask you for a coat, give them your shirt also. Because God gave you what you have. You're to give you what you have to what their needs are. And that's a very important thing to remember. Sometimes we get away from following Jesus' teachings on things. And we go from love all to love with a pure heart. And this is verses 32 through 36. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. If you do what is good to those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. Jesus acknowledged that it's easy to love those who love you. We do it with our families, our friends. We love them. But those who do not claim Jesus as Lord do the same thing. So people can't tell us apart if we're not reaching out that extra step or going that extra distance. Christ called us to be a different standard, to set a different standard. And being different means pouring out the same love on our enemies that we pour out on those closest to us. We don't have the freedom to pick and choose the ones we love. We should be motivated by pure compassion for each person, just as God loved us. In Luke's world, credit implies repayment for a service. But Jesus' followers were to expect nothing in return for their love. The same is true for our good works. So if we go out and do good to somebody, we don't expect anything back. We don't expect any glory back, because I'm telling you, that's not the Christ way. If we're going down a road where we're looking for glory for ourselves, you took the wrong turn. We're to love our enemies. We're to love everyone. God doesn't say just love this group of people over here. He said to love everyone just as he loved us. So let's look at verse 34. And if you lend to those from whom you expect to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners to be repaid in full. How you approach the need of others is a very important thing. When we give without expecting to receive, the transaction's not a loan. It becomes a gift, an act of generosity. So that's how we give. We give out of our generosity, out of what God gave us. Selling our accounts with honor and integrity is just as important today as it was in the first century. But Jesus' focus was on the heart rather than the material possessions. And I know this world today, it's all about material possessions. We don't see the generosity that we once seen. When we willingly meet the needs of others, we prove our trust in God and make a huge difference in the world. Let's go into verse 35 through 36. And it says, but love your enemies, do what is good, and lend, expecting nothing in return. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High. For he is gracious to the ungrateful and evil. Be merciful just as your Father also is merciful. He's got 3 opening words in that sentence. Love, do, and lend. They are commands reflecting God's heart, not suggestions reflecting our preferences. I believe, as believers, our love should set us apart from all others. We should love with pure intentions, expecting nothing in return. Because when we love without expecting anything, we create ripples that stretch into eternity. We demonstrate that Jesus changes people, and that we can be incredibly appealing to unbelievers longing to find love and peace. The act of loving others never goes unnoticed by God. Jesus promised a reward greater than anything we can imagine. But don't misunderstand me here. He's not referring to material possessions as a reward. While he provides for our needs in this life, the true blessing will be realized in the next life. But God will reward us for being good and loving everyone just as he was. That's amazing, folks. That's truly amazing. Because our loving actions toward others demonstrate our personal relationship with God. Think about that. It demonstrates our relationship with God. You know, children often imitate their parents. We need to imitate Jesus, just as we did our parents. The idea of being a child of the Most High reminds readers of the angel's description of Jesus as a son of the Most High, because that was early in Luke's Gospel, chapter 1, verse 32. Likewise, we prove that we are children of God, and we act like our Father. People see God. As believers, we know what it means to experience mercy. We were once ungrateful and evil ourselves. Jesus directed us to pay mercy forward to others. The word merciful in verse 36 means compassionate. We are to be compassionate as God is compassionate. And the last of the verses we're going to look at is, and with mercy. So we've seen love all with a pure heart and with mercy. And that's going to be verses 37 through 38. And it says, do not judge, you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be poured out into your lap. For the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. Now, in the command not to judge, Jesus was saying that Christians have no license to tear others down through criticism. We're not judges. So don't get that wrong. God rescued us from judgment, condemnation, and unwillingness to forgive, and we obscure his grace if our actions deny him. So if we do things that deny grace, we're covering him up. We can't do those things if we're Christians. In addition, obeying these commands is a sign of humility. God alone has the right to judge and condemn others because he alone is completely just and completely righteous at the same time. We don't have that right. Only God has that right. Just as grace and forgiveness beget grace and forgiveness, generosity gives rise to an abundance. When we are faithful with the gifts God has given us, he will entrust us with more. And Jesus affirmed this truth in other teachings, such as the parable of the talents in Matthew 25, verses 14 through 36. Good stewards are given the privilege of practicing greater levels of stewardship. And Jesus used the image of a container of grain being pressed down and shaken together until it overflows. The receiver is not cheated, but gets an amount that is more than fair. While Jesus is no way advocating prosperity, we can't give in God. We will always give what we need. But as we honor him with our gifts, we will allow more to pass through our hands. But it's important to recall that giving is not just about monetary resources. We also can be generous with intangible gifts such as time, talents, grace, and compassion. Also, we should remember that giving reflects the character of God. He gave his Son, and he continues to give good gifts to his children. So when we give generously, whether it's our time, talents, or the gracious acts mentioned in verse 37, we are showing the world what God is really like. So go out today and show the world what God is really like. We need to practice the same things that Jesus did when he walked the face of this earth. We need to be loving, kind, compassionate, and giving. So when you go out today, be kind, be loving, bless them, pray for them. These are things God's asked us to do. And it will make us more like him each and every time we do it. I hope you all have a great day today. I hope you enjoyed the lesson. I'm a little bit rusty. I haven't done it in a few weeks, but I'm glad to be back. And God bless you all until we meet again. Amen.